Hey folks, this is Emily. I'm back home from my trip to Wisconsin. I was up at the Wisconsin Land and Water Conference. They gave me this sweet hat, and it was a wonderful opportunity to learn about landscape, social, and climate conditions in Wisconsin. I want to share with you a lot of interesting good news. So, this is why I was up there. Wisconsin Land and Water invited me up to give a dialogue workshop to help people on the ground practice skills about communicating about socially sensitive science, like we try to do on this channel, helping to make climate information more accessible for people. It's a great workshop. And, people inviting me to their conferences and taking care of me historically has not been like a 1-to-1 ratio for me not complaining about them. You might remember when I was up in Duluth, I had a lot of unpleasant things to say about Duluth. The level of social inequality in Duluth was crushing. I found a lot of the obstructionism in the climate resilience community, a lot of the tendency to conceal information, very frustrating and disturbing. And I found the incorporation yet othering of people from tribal nations, of indigenous people, to be troubling at that conference. I was excited to go to Wisconsin, but I approached it with a skeptical eye, and I got blown away by like just the awesomeness of my whole Wisconsin experience. So let me tell you a little bit about where I was, what I was expecting to see, and what I did see. Previously, when I went through Minnesota up to Duluth, I had been hopeful. You hear about like climate proof Duluth, right? And I had seen in the projections that it looked like we were actually heading into a higher change landscape when we got that far up north. I did see that on the ground. More landscape transition, more tree death than anyone would like to see up in northern Minnesota. But in this trip to Wisconsin, I was expecting to be in, if you see this circled area here that I'm making with my mouse, this area is likely to have really quite good climate preservation, relatively low change, and I was interested to find out about it. I was also interested to spend some time in the Driftless region. The Driftless area is a very beautiful place that's a little bit different from what you might expect with a Midwestern landscape. There's an unglaciated area, an area that wasn't squished by glaciers over the last hundreds of thousands of years, and areas that have similar terrains that were glaciated, but they didn't get like totally squished over on the Iowa side. So this area, you have all of these beautiful like little hollers coming down to the river. You have little winding rivers, little waterfalls, rocky terrain, forested terrain. It's very nice. It's very picturesque. And this has been kind of a hotbed for sustainability development. The soil and the water resources there are both abundant and fragile. They require particular care. It's very easy to pollute the groundwater there. So, a lot of people who are interested in sustainable food systems and agriculture have been drawn to it by both the beauty, the potential, and the challenge. Exploring this area was one of my goals on this trip. As an example of what all is going on in the Driftless, I know a lot of people who are taking classes at the Driftless Folk School to learn different sustainable life ways in the area from practitioners in the area. It's really a very strong community of people coming together who want to get on the right path, who want to be able to live in a harmonious way with the land and move forward through this time of change together. A nice community. Once I headed north from my home, which is about here in Iowa, I didn't go through Dubuque. I didn't take the big roads. I went up through Prairie du Chien, which this is a very beautiful area with a long history of human habitation. There's a lot of mound builder sites. There's a lot of ancient indigenous sites in this area. People have lived here for a long time. And I went up to Richland Center to stay with my friend there and had an opportunity to walk around and talk with her about what she and people in her community are seeing with this unusual spring. Like with my home in central Iowa, we are all definitely noticing that these conditions are unusual, but we are not seeing the premature flowering that many people have observed and have reported to me over on the East Coast and towards the southeastern United States. It seems to us like, fingers crossed and knock on wood, we're going to be able to get through this unusual spring without dramatic permanent disturbances to spring emergence ecological cycles. We're starting to see hatch of flies and winged insects. We got to walk through by the river a great fly hatch. and the drought is less extreme over there. We also saw many migrating birds moving into the area under a little bit of unusual timing, and they seem to be under different pressures. For example, while I was there, I was accompanied by many flights of swans. I saw a lot of swans moving into the area. These are places where our native swans had been locally extinct for some time. Many people I met were delighted by these flights of swans coming into Wisconsin. And I have to say, every person that I met in this time going through the Driftless area was a kind and interesting person, which is a rare thing for me to say. It was rare to run across so many people who were really alert and really able to respond to the world around them and to notice change in the world around them. I found it refreshing and delightful. And as I expected, once I got north of, let's see here, there it is, about Castle Rock Lake there, as I headed up north through a variety of weird back roads going up to Green Bay, in this area, including the Menominee Reservation, is your highest conserved area according to the maps. I started to see just beautiful landscapes. I started to see some of the most healthy coniferous forests that I have seen in years. It was wonderful to see. And throughout this area, there are so many communities of like 5,000, 10,000 people where you see many locally owned businesses, you see healthy local economies, you see people who are very obviously engaged in their lives. And I saw that most people appeared to be very healthy. Most people had good color to their skin, like they eat a healthy diet. People appeared to have sufficient access to basic medical services. It was wonderful to see. And when I got to the conference at Green Bay, at the hotel, a conference is going to have people who are doing catering work, who are doing housekeeping work at the hotel. I was very delighted to see that the people in service professions all along the way, gas station attendants, people doing catering work, people doing service work, appeared to be very similar in health, very similar in security, very similar in dress to the people at the conference. There wasn't this crushing feeling of social inequality in Wisconsin that I noticed particularly up in northern Minnesota. I found it to be very wholesome, very positive experience, both socially and in terms of landscape observation. In Green Bay, the learning at the conference was excellent. I want to present this page as an example of the sort of high quality, at a glance summation of consensus science that was available to the ground practitioners, to the conservation people who do work on the ground in Wisconsin. We know that a lot of the Earth scenarios, a lot of our temperature readings are coming in really hot right now, where we might see these conditions before 2050. But a state agency has a responsibility to report on consensus science. This is an incredibly nice, condensed 2050 consensus science report available to practitioners. For decades, I think it's worth noting that Wisconsin has taken its natural resources conservation very seriously and has an excellent history of educating the public about how to do it. This groundwater contamination susceptibility map, you might notice, is from 1989, but it provides super clear at-a-glance pictures of where are you likely to be able to contaminate the groundwater more easily in red or less easily in green. The focus on water quality in Wisconsin at every level. The governor came to this conference. The governor of Wisconsin came and spoke on water quality and the state's financial commitment to dealing with PFAS in water systems. The governor spoke about the importance of every person in Wisconsin being able to turn on the tap and expect clean water, and their commitment to preserve that access to clean water is very serious. And I think that it bodes very well for Wisconsin's good future as we move forward in these decades of change. And I'd like you to note this area looks very good, right? Looks very good in the climate outlook. Also, the groundwater appears to be quite safe. It's a lower susceptibility area for groundwater contamination. Major points on. Let's share a little story about the population of people at this conference. It was delightful to spend time with the people at this conference. They were such a healthy group of people. And I'll talk more about that later, but I want to give as an example of that. And sat at Dr. Carson's presentation here about the way that the lower Wisconsin River stream flow has changed over time and how that impacts the landscape. This is a very serious geology lecture. You might imagine that people could potentially be bored by this fascinating information. He did a great talk, but like this is a hardcore geology lecture. It was an hour and 15 minutes. There was about 45 people in the room. I sat in the back to observe the crowd as well as learn about this cool river situation. No one looked at their phone or did anything but pay attention to the speaker for an hour and 15 minutes. Not every population in the US is capable of that sort of attention span anymore. And I found that at this conference, the people in Wisconsin's conservation community had many signs of excellent mental and physical health. When I walk around, I'm a fast walker. Usually I walk faster than most people. These people were leaving me in the dust. There was a lot of really fast walkers there. The men and the women who are involved in the conservation work on the ground are alert, they're friendly, and they're very present in their bodies and in their reality in a way that is empowered, where we're not looking ourselves as like victims of situations, right? We're looking at ourselves as like apex predators who are large and moving through our landscape and are capable of impacting things in a significant way. And that sort of embodied awareness is a wonderful thing to be around and an increasingly scarce resource in our society. It's sad to me, reflecting on my experience at the conference, that it has been so long since I was in a group of people where I felt like the average person was at least as healthy or healthier than I was. The average person looks like they eat as good a better a diet than I do, and where people were so willing to pay attention to social cues from each other. As an example, when I parked to go into the conference, I was in a parking garage by myself. I'm in the back of my car putting my bags in order. And I feel this guy come out of a truck and check me out. Not like he was being a creep or something. Sometimes you're walking around, you see a person and you check them out. But we were alone in this parking garage, right? And that's a scary moment as a woman alone in a parking garage. I was already responding in case of a potential threat. You know, I already had my hand on a weapon. These things happen fast. But I felt this guy sense my discomfort, and he makes the deliberate decision to make a wide perimeter, to make a broad perimeter around me, to show that he's going to give me space, that he's not going to be a threat to me, to go in the far door. No talking about it, no drama, just an awareness that he's a powerful person who has a real impact on the people in the landscape around him. I was very moved. I felt a great deal of regard for this man. And I had many similar moments throughout this conference, which was full of people like who want to drink some beer and talk about their fantasy of restoring foodways that are full of more native plants. They want to sit down and hang out and talk about the ways that they have been going up to the Menominee Reservation and learning traditional craft. Because in this population, there was not an othering of Indigenous people. There was no clinging to this fiction that the Indians are all dead. There are people who are married to Indigenous people. There were Indigenous people who were just, you know, at the conference as normal professionals, a very integrated vibe, a very healthy vibe, a lot of mutual regard. You could tell this was a community of people who had done a lot of work and was at a different place in their conversation about the relationship to the land than the national conversation. And I don't think that it's a bad thing to acknowledge that we can be in different places in this conversation. So you can tell I loved it. The whole experience was incredible. And I know I was dealing at this conference with a very select subset of the Wisconsin population. But knowing that those are the people on the ground doing the work is a powerful source of hope in a state with this level of hope in the future. On my way home, I spent some time checking out Green Bay. So in Green Bay, I got the tip that I should go to this bakehouse. Oh my gosh. It was incredible. The quality of the food in Wisconsin is as good as anything that I've had on the East or the West Coast. Their sourdough is wild. Throughout the time I spent exploring Green Bay, I ran into a lot of friendly people who were very like alert and present in their life, people who were friendly, people who wanted to like tell you what to do if you approach as an outsider nice way. It's very like in that Midwestern mom gonna boss you around kind of way. Personally enjoy it because settled in a new area. It can be hard to know what to do. The impression that I get is that if you get into Green Bay, people are going to push you around and help you get settled, which can be a nice thing. I stopped also in Madison to buy some groceries before I went all the way home, and I stopped at a few different stores in Madison to try and get the vibe there. In Madison, I also saw very good social conditions, the majority of people very responsive, embodied, empowered in their lives, looking pretty healthy. I saw many more people wearing masks than in other parts of the state, which I would expect because in Madison, you're going to have more people who are there for the healthcare, more people who might be immunocompromised and need to go out and live and work anyway. I always find it to be a good sign when there are people masked in public and people who are working masked in public, and everyone treats it as really normal. Everyone looks at people who are looking a little bit different and don't assume any kind of a negative othering. They assume that maybe this person has health concerns. They assume that this person has a right to do what they want with their body to address health concerns. I thought that this was an important cultural note because I know many people who are following this, you might have health issues or disability where you want to know where's a good destination where I can also meet those needs. I saw good signs of that in both Madison and Green Bay, that these were inclusive, healthy communities. Really nice. If Wisconsin's not on your radar, it really should be. I see a lot of potential in Wisconsin. It's a beautiful state, it's a welcoming people. There are, of course, a few caveats as always. If you struggle with addiction or if you have a history of alcoholism, the drinking culture in Wisconsin might be problematic for you. It is very common to drink all of the time in Wisconsin. In any small town in Wisconsin, there's going to be like 17 bars, and there's going to be people in all 17 of those bars. It's like how in small town Iowa, you've got like 17 little tiny churches. How are they all staying open? I don't know. It's the same mystery. It's the same small town multi service mystery. In Wisconsin, also, there are capacity issues. I talked with many folks who are living in beautiful potential destination areas in Wisconsin, more rural areas, living on like a pretty lake or something. And they say that there are already many people coming in who are at retirement age, and that it is a challenge to provide sufficient services, both sufficient utility services. Some of the lakes that have a shallower water table are experiencing water stress, and other services. Like it's hard to get in at the vet because there are so many more people coming to the area. It's hard to get contractors to come into your house because there are so many more people coming to your area. So I think that it's worth thinking about Wisconsin not like as this universal destination area because there is limited capacity, and they are getting close to that capacity in some of that desirable areas of Wisconsin already, but of thinking of it as a potential destination, particularly for families, for people who are in their working lives yet. I heard from many people who talked about these capacity issues that they would love to have more working age, working class families come to the area, experience a livable wage in a beautiful place, and raise their children there. This was not presented in a negative way. It wasn't presented in a no retirees kind of way. It was presented with a genuine concern that people who are coming there who are at the end of their working lives might not be able to access the services that they needed for a comfortable retirement. I thought that these messages were delivered very compassionately and very consistently from many individuals that I talked to in many parts of Wisconsin related to climate migration. People in Wisconsin all over the place appeared to be ready to have that conversation. They appeared to be aware of the strength of their hand and to be ready to do what it takes to defend their land, to defend their beautiful land. I live in an area where there is a lot of death in the coniferous trees. The emerald ash borer just came in recently. There's a lot of standing dead ash. So I come down and I look at this higher change landscape and I see it afresh. I do see the pain on the land in my area, which is relatively lower change compared to many areas in the US. It made me think about how difficult it is to be in these higher change areas and feel that level of stress. And I think that it's worth knowing that there is this rejuvenating, hopeful experience out there of visiting these lower change areas and potentially imagining a life for yourself there. Wisconsin is low capacity compared to my area, the Prairie Pothole region. In my area, the Prairie Pothole region models better up to 4C than the forested areas of Wisconsin do. But I think this is, regardless, very important information to take in as we start to think of what is in the future for the Midwest. We hope that this video gave you some useful or interesting information as you start thinking about what's going on in the Midwest for our climate future. As we approach these decades of change, the Midwest is likely to become a bigger player because of our relatively stable climate outlook and because of our abundant freshwater resources. We see that alongside capacity and structural capacity issues in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is looking great, and it has the people and the culture it needs to keep it strong and maximize its potential. I was so happy to see that, and I hope that this information is helpful for you as you start imagining your future. Talk to you soon. Folks, thanks for watching and thanks for joining us. AR has recently passed a milestone. We've reached more than 100,000 people in America with detailed local climate information, and it's thanks to the incredible support of the AR community. There are so many folks committing their financial resources, their energy, their time to helping this information get out there. I'm so grateful to all of you, and I'm so glad that we're doing this together. Thanks for being there with me. I'm going to keep an eye on the news. I'm going to keep an eye on high consensus science. I'm going to try and get you what you need as we go through this together.